What happened there?
That was so fast. There he is. The backup is presented by Evil Spy Boy, one of our top stitch patrons, the best evil person we know. And I would have said that was Evil Spy Boy, but it's actually the person who enjoys killing the people just to make a graveyard, which is like, graveyards are there because death happens as a byproduct of life, not because we want to build a graveyard in the first place. Get your exclamation mark Spy Boys out in the chat, because thanks to his generous Patreon support, Evil Spy Boy is bringing you the backup, and he's hoping you bring the generosity to Food Bank Australia. Donate at foodbank.org.au and head to tasteofmultifish.com for more of Evil Spy Boy's proclivities. Okay, let's back up and look at the biggest stories on the week as voted on by us, the host of the backup, where we back up and look at the biggest stories of the week. Steph, please start us off. You are our guest today, with a story that made you back up this week and say, hey, that's a pretty big story.
Absolutely. Well, it may not be the biggest story for everybody, but for me, this was huge. I, like many other fans, have been hungering for like a scrap, a tasty morsel of information pertaining to the new Dragon Age 4 game. And this week, our patience was rewarded. We were thrown a bone in the form of a report that not only detailed a rough release window, but also gave a bit of an update on how the game is kind of tracking at the moment. So the report came from VentureBeat reporter Jeff Grubb and his podcast Grub Snacks. And whilst he's not like an official BioWare spokesperson, he is usually really reliable with BioWare info. So we can kind of take it as like, this is probably pretty realistic. So the release window that they've kind of indicated is that, unfortunately, we will not be seeing any actual Dragon Age 4 until at least 18 months from now. So that kind of puts it, I think, if my maths is correct, which is probably not, roughly around August, September of 2023. Having said that, that is the early side of it. So realistically, it's probably going to be closer to the early 2024, which sounds like a long way away. But when you think about it, that will make it a decade since the release of the previous installment, Dragon Age Inquisition. So realistically, they've been waiting a really long time.
Yeah, and that's only like 2 COVID variants away, really,
Exactly.
when you think about it in COVID terms. Yeah,
you could replay all the games, and by the time it comes around, you'd be like, yes, I'm good, I'm ready to go. But yeah, apart from that.
So you're obviously a big fan of the original trilogy.
Well, I'm a newcomer to the trilogy, though. I didn't play 10 years ago. I'm a fraud if I say that. But I came into the games in the last couple of years because pandemic, I had time. And I've since spent every waking minute from finishing the games just thinking about it and like thirsting over Varric Tethras through the medium of like fan fiction. I have no shame for that. He's a sexy dwarf. I can say that. He's a sexy dwarf. And I think because of that, I'm just very
He's a sexy
excited
dwarf.
for it.
I can say that. He's a sexy dwarf.
He is. I will stand by this position. Varric Tethras, sexy dwarf. And hopefully, probably not, but hopefully a romanceable option for people such as myself who just thirst for the dwarf and his chest hair. But yeah, it's looking to be pretty good. The other updates were that everything is kind of hitting the right milestones and it's on track. BioWare do have a bit of a history of being a little bit late and delivering later deadlines and extending deadlines for their games. Hopefully that's only a good thing in this case, and we'll see it realistically 2024 is my guess at this point.
So
yeah, cool.
I've played all the Dragon Age games, and I really enjoyed most of them. And I enjoyed the first zone of Dragon Age Inquisition, which I spent 30 hours in, and then stopped playing it. But it's been a very long time. It's been nearly 10 years since I played them. What are you looking for from a new Dragon Age game, given that it's been a decade since we've had it, and games have changed so much since then? Like, what's on the list besides banging the dwarf that you want from this?
I mean, realistically, that is the list, but I will continue. In addition to banging the dwarf, I think a lot of people were really interested in updated combat for it. I think because one of the reasons that we're not getting a remastered version of the game, for instance, is because all of the other 3 games run on different engines. And there's a little bit of inconsistency through the other 3 games. So I think from Dragon Age 4, what would be really great is to just take those strong elements of each one. And now that we have the capacity to really have this detailed, beautiful world, have that all in one go, have the sarcastic options, because we love a sarcastic dialogue choice. And have, I think, I realistically would like to see new companions, but I think there's obviously going to be some degree of fan service to see all of the old ones coming back through, like the sexy dwarf. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting because we'll also be exploring an area of that world that we haven't seen already. Early indications are that we'll be visiting the Tevinter Imperium, which is not seen before, but has been discussed in the lore and in conversations. It's where Dorian, the companion, is from, and it looks to be quite interesting if you play as a mage. Which I don't,
cool.
but I mean, good for you. As long as I get my dwarf, I'm happy.
And do we have any information on this about whether or not it's still just a standalone story-based RPG, right? Like we're not going any, or that we know of, any sort of like live service or extremely long tail on this besides potentially DLC.
At this juncture, yes. Having said that, if there's more, I'm never going to say no. But I think given the scope and the scale that they're looking for with Dragon Age 4, I think let's just focus on that for now and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Like BioWare were like the absolute pinnacle of RPG storytelling throughout Mass Effect and Dragon Age. Everyone just anticipated. They were the most highly anticipated RPGs of that era. I do wonder if that kind of game is still a viable game to be making for 2024. I hope it is, because I didn't play Dragon Age because I played Mass Effect and was like, I've had enough BioWare RPG and I can see what I would get from the fantasy version, and I can look at people thirsting over. There were so many boob mods for Dragon Age 2 that I was like, oh, that's what that game is about. But apparently there was a story as well.
You got to put boobs on that dwarf.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have exposed chest hair. It's just asking for it at this point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I really hope it's exactly what you hope BioWare are going to put out and what we know BioWare can accomplish. And I think this would be the first Dragon Age game that I go into in earnest, because I dabbled with 2 and Origins and didn't bother with 3 because of how big it was. I'm still scared of games that are going to take me 300 hours to finish. So
that's
totally
fair.
And it is like you said. I mean, it's that interesting thing. BioWare have such a reputation for quality because of going right back, but particularly I think hitting their stride with Mass Effect and Dragon Age as being these 2 epic series that were happening relatively simultaneously. Like the same people were having their fingers in a lot of those pies, and that it just was so beloved. And then there was a bit of a gap, and then we got the Anthem, we got the what was the Mass Effect Andromeda, and we sort of got this fall off on BioWare. They've gone dark for a while, but the same people aren't there as were there when they were making this initial stuff. So it really is like a second coming out party for them. And given that we know there's new Mass Effect coming as well, they're kind of like, let's bring back the 2010s. Let's just make all that happen. We tried other things. It wasn't working. Let's literally just do the thing we did before, which was put out a fantasy trilogy and a space trilogy and hope to God that it works. So I'm excited for it. Exactly. Yeah. And it was very broke for many years. So it's like, it was broke. Let's not even fix it. Let's just abandon everything else and go back to the roots.
I stand by Mass Effect Andromeda. It got a lot of flack for those facial animations. And there were some lulls in the game for sure, but it actually was a pretty good Mass Effect story.
It was pretty good.
Fine. I think. I mean, it did come off the back of the idea that, like, how do you compete with a trilogy of like a story that by the time you get to the 3rd game, you are so in love with these characters you need to, and then you throw all that out and you're like, let's just start a new one, and it's a very difficult thing to do.
Well, I will say,
also Grubs.
Sorry.
Sorry. Go. No, please.
I have a running series at the moment where my dad plays through games because he is playing for the first time basically everything. And we went through all of the Mass Effect games, and then he got to Andromeda and he was like, no, my boy's not there. And because Garrus wasn't there, he was just like, no, I'm not doing this. Absolutely not. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it. And which is why with Dragon Age 4, I think there will be existing companions coming through, because otherwise there will be people rioting in the streets.
It predates Disney going, you know what? Only fan service.
Yeah.
Fuck original ideas. Only fan service forever.
Totally.
And so they were like, they did the exact opposite at the start of that game where they're like, none of that story matters because we jumped across to a different galaxy that aren't affected by the Reapers, and Shepard isn't a hero or hasn't become one yet. So it's like, And for people who love that series, they're like, fuck you, BioWare.
Totally.
Which I was as well until I started playing the game. I was like, it's fine. But yeah.
A preemptive fuck you, BioWare.
Yeah.
I got $30 that says Garrus is a companion in Dragon Age. That's how fan servicey we get.
All right.
All right, moving on to our second story. Pete, what made you back up this week?
Well, I think this dropped like last night. It was the news that the Microsoft Activision acquisition was pretty rushed. Everyone who saw the number 70 billion was like, well, that would have taken some time to put together. But apparently, the process went. November 16th was when the Wall Street Journal report was published about Kotick and the sexual harassment claims. And following that report, so on November 16th, Activision's share price dropped by nearly $10. On November 18th, 2 days later, Spencer issued that email that everyone applauded, saying that he was disturbed and deeply troubled by that report. Yeah. Words. He said words. But good on him for... No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, like, I think true, because I think Phil Spencer's actually a really good guy. And I think he really meant that. But it's also like, if there's any way I could potentially just affect the stock price a little more, this might be...
That'd be great.
Me coming out and supporting this, that might be something that...
Yeah. Because the very next day, he was on the phone to Kotick. This is according to an SEC filing. And was having conversation about potential strategies for the companies to work together, and said, hey, my boss wants to chat tomorrow. You free? And Kotick was like, yeah, I'm free. Let's chat. And on the 20th of November, this is 4 days after the Wall Street Journal report was published, Microsoft made it clear that they wanted to buy Activision. And within 8 weeks, that deal was put together for $70 billion. 8 weeks it was announced, so it was probably like they were signing it the week before that, and a big part of this was, as part of the same SEC report or filing, was that there apparently was quite a bit of competition. There was a bit of interest in buying Activision, which shouldn't be too surprising, but I don't think anyone was coming in with swinging the $70 billion D around. There were apparently 4 other companies with some serious interest. Tencent's got to be one of them, right?
Oh, 100%.
Totally.
Yeah.
Embracing.
Maybe Sony gave them a call, but
A short
I don't think
call,
was
if
playing in the
anything.
wheelhouse. Yeah. Kotick was like, oh, no thanks. And then who knows who else is involved.
I reckon
apparently one group
maybe, but if I don't know if they have that kind of money. But
there was talk of a group trying to split Activision and Blizzard and just buying and just buying the Blizzard. One company tried to just buy the Blizzard out of the whole deal, but it sounded like too much trouble. And obviously Microsoft came in playing hardball and just wanted it. So, well, not playing hardball. What's the opposite of hardball?
Softball, presumably.
Softball.
Yeah. Soft square. I don't know.
Throwing all of the money in the world at them to make it go through as quickly as possible. So,
I mean, it is very short turnaround. I do remember Phil Spencer saying that he basically spent his Christmas putting this deal together. That was something that he didn't spend any Christmas time. He was just on the phone to Bobby Kotick the whole time, which sounds like a terrible Christmas. I can't imagine anything worse. But yes, the fast turnaround on that, I think, is really good. I did see Middle C in the chat saying, honestly, Spencer's branding is impeccable. He's manipulating share prices and still got people saying he's a good guy. I did see a lot of, criticism floating around when this story came out about the idea of like Microsoft jumping on when Activision when it came out, and it was like, oh, one man's sexual harassment lawsuit is another man's opportunity. And there's a cynical part where I'm like, oh, sure. But also I'm like, I don't know what the problem, like that's what you do when you see when there's an opportunity to be able to capitalize in a business world on something like that, you take it. And it's not like he was like, I'm going to buy you and we're going to continue the sexual harassment. Like, he's not like, I'm buying you to
because of it.
Because of it. He's buying it because it was cheaper and that's the reason that he jumped on. So, but yeah, 8 weeks. My God, I'm waiting for that phone call. Steph, have you ever been offered $70 billion for,
8 weeks work?
I mean, no, but I'm open to offers. If people would just shoot me a message, that would be great. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good.
I'll make you a graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, Mr. Spencer, if you're watching, I am disturbed and deeply troubled by Steph Panicasio's Sims 4 graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Deeply troubling. Troubling.
But it's beautiful.
Deeply troubling.
By now. Deeply troubling by now.
This is an internal memo to staff. This won't ever get leaked, so that's fine. I feel like it's also interesting. The final thing on this was that this deal 8 weeks, but the Bungie thing apparently was months and months and months. Like the Bungie thing, it sounds like the Bungie thing was potentially happening before this deal went through, from the sounds of it, and that there was, and that makes sense because Bungie, while probably needing money and investment, weren't in the free fall that Activision was. So there wasn't like, we need to do this right now. So yeah, anyway, just seeing these billionaires manipulate the world around us, it's very depressing. But then at the same time, I let it pay like $12 to get the next Call of Duty. So, swings and roundabouts. And speaking of enormous purchases, my story that made me back up this week, there was a lot of sort of like Ubisoft talk. I feel like, going from one problematic company to another, I feel like there is so much Ubisoft talk at the moment. I keep seeing the NFT thing where it's like employees are constantly pushing back internally against the company on that. But when the story with the Activision thing, one of the conversations around that was whether or not Ubisoft would be bought. And Ubisoft, I feel like, when it comes to acquisitions and purchases, kind of infamous for withstanding attempts to be bought, and in some cases, hostile takeovers.
Yeah.
They've sort of been staunchly independent, if you can call a multi-billion-dollar company independent. But there was a question about whether or not now would be the time for Ubisoft to sell. There was it was a conversation between, I don't know why the conversation was happening, maybe an investor call or something. It was an earnings call. And it was between the CEO and the CFO, so Yves Guillemot and Frederic Dugo, maybe. And he was asked about, is being acquired something that Ubisoft was interested in? And the CFO said, we will not speculate on why people would not have made an offer. And then Guillemot interrupted him and said, if any offers were made, actually. And the CFO went, absolutely, I can't comment on that any further. And then went on to talk about how they're independent, they've got a strong IP. And it was one of those situations where it was like, hang on a second, Guillemot interrupting him and going like, whoa. It's not that nobody wants to dance with this. It's that we're being choosy about who we want to pick. And sort of going,
everyone wants us.
We're fielding offers left, right, and center. You should put in a bid now, which is, significant because Ubisoft have been fending this stuff off. I guess the thing that I thought when I read that was there's been a couple of other stories coming out over the last couple of days with Ubisoft titles. Assassin's Creed Valhalla expansion, not the Ragnarok one, but the next one, apparently has been turned into a standalone game. Skull and Bones is coming within the next 18 months. It's a multiplayer first game. This was again on the earnings call. And they said that they're really happy with the state that it's in and that it's coming out in the next 18 months. There was no talk about Roller Champions whatsoever. But there's also on Grubsnacks, the very same Grubsnacks where Jeff was talking about the BioWare stuff, he was talking about Ghost Recon Frontline, a game that I forgot even existed, and X-Defiant are both really close to launch as well, and they're in the middle of just making sure that those games are sort of like fun to play. All of that being said, I don't know whether or not Ubisoft is the attractive purchase that they were a few years ago, potentially. I don't know what gap Ubisoft are filling in the portfolio of the big players at the moment. If you look at like Sony or Microsoft or Tencent what buying a Ubisoft does beyond the fact that you just get their games. But to get those games, you're going to have to splash out a huge amount of money. And like Sony already do the sort of like big showpiece video games, which is what Assassin's Creed, I guess, used to be before it became much more about like the length of the game as opposed to the sort of like specialness of it. Microsoft have that stuff covered as well. But Ubisoft doesn't really do a huge amount of multiplayer that is doing anything particularly different than anyone else. So I feel like they're kind of in this weak position now to be sold at a time when they probably could benefit from the most. I don't know. Steph, do you see a world where Ubisoft gets purchased over the next couple of years, or is it something that these companies don't necessarily need anymore?
I think if they do, it won't necessarily be because they're like, wow, we really want Ubisoft right now. It'll be because everyone's buying everything and they want to have a greater claim to all of that sort of stuff, rather than necessarily it being a, hey, Ubisoft has such value, we need to acquire this right now. Because you're right, a lot of the corners that Ubisoft fill, other studios can do. And it's not necessarily something that I think will be at the forefront of anyone's attention anytime soon.
Yeah.
I saw some... sorry, Pete.
I just was quickly looking up their revenue, and they had a 50% increase in 2021 over 2020, but that was after a bad year, I think. It's a $2.5 billion yearly revenue company. So like it's not small. They've got some really big IP. They're kind of that thing that's just they're Subaru, right? It's like Subaru is like this independent car company. It's like they're doing well on their own. We don't really want to touch it. They do good stuff, but we don't need their stuff. And so the people that like the Subaru will buy the Subaru and continue to buy the Subaru, and Subaru is working as a company, but it can't get any bigger. It's not going to get any smaller soon. So why touch it?
I think it's one of those, because I saw that Assassin's Creed hit some milestone where they made just an absolute fortune, and it's like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, I think are two games that are like lots of hardcore gamers play, but also a huge amount of people on that next level down where they buy like 2 or 3 games a year. Like it's kind of there with the FIFA or the Madden and Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Call of Duty. These games where it's like so many people play them who aren't necessarily on Reddit talking about video games or watching a show like this. And that's a lot of what is like propping that company up in a strong way. But I also saw some reports over the last sort of 12 months talking about, not that Ubisoft are in a weak position, but they sink so much money and time into these huge games that have to hit. They're not particularly diverse as a company. They have like the pillars on which that company is built. If one of those things fucks up, that is a catastrophic situation for them, because it's like, we need Assassins to sell, we need Far Cry to sell, we need Rainbow Six to maintain, and everything else there is this sort of experiment that if it falls over, okay, but if any of those pillars fall over, that company is in massive trouble. So whether they're looking at the environment now and going, actually being acquired wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but now
I think it'd be like a huge boon for them. You're right, like, and I think everyone in the industry has seen the homogenization of Ubisoft titles. They still do really, really cool little things. Every time they do something little, it's awesome. Like any other publisher that tries that, it's like they managed to swing a deal with bloody Nintendo to do Mario and Rabbids. Brawlhalla's great. Roller Champs demo in 2004 was sick. I'm sure we'll see that again. So giving them
Riders Republic is cool. Like Riders Republic is
cool. True.
A different thing.
That's such a European thing, though. No one wants that shit.
It is, but it's like it's fun. It's a thing that no one else is making. Maybe
totally.
Isn't, but I like it.
Yeah. And I think if they were given a bit more financial security, they could be a bit more play a little riskier with their mainline titles as well. And not
Immortals Phoenix Rising. Great game.
Immortals Phoenix Rising, great game. But it's an Assassin's Creed game with a different skin.
It's Assassin's Creed game that made love to Zelda. And, yeah, totally. All right. Well, we'll see what happens with Ubisoft. Yeah, it's an interesting position for so many years. Gilmore being like making news for the moves that he made to not get bought, and then 2 years later interrupting his CFO, going, "Shut the fuck up! You're breaking this." Which is fantastic. Getting to some announcements and delays. We got 2 announcements for games that look interesting. The first one being a game called Abermore, which I feel like is so my shit, and maybe is Steph's shit as well. And I think it's Peach. I think it's all of our shit. The developer, they made 10 Second Ninja, a very small game, but this is a first-person stealth game. It's basically like a thief-style game, committed to the heist of the century by bursting into the royal palace and stealing everything that isn't nailed down. Looks very cool. This looks like a very systems-based, bizarre banana throwing at people to kill them game. But this instantly shot to my watch list. I'm super keen for this one. Steph, are you into are you into stuff like Dishonored and
I am,
sort of
yes.
systems-based stealthy stuff?
In almost any game that I have the option to, I will play as an assassin rogue. So anytime I get to steal things and kill things, I'm happy. And this, I saw the word heists. I saw killing with a banana. This is so up my alley. It's knocking on my door.
Bury your family.
Basically.
Abermore.
Yeah. And then the other game that got announced, Scathe, which is a bullet hell FPS. It's basically like how much can we make Doom and not be sued? But looks very cool as well. And there is a demo that's significant for this one. There's a demo coming out this week as part of the Steam Next Fest as well. It looks very shiny. Pete, this could be your kind of thing.
We're running out of cool words to name shooters and horror games.
So
Scathe. Scathe's like, you just get scathed, not mutilated. Bring Mutilator 7 out. That's what I fucking want to play. We've got Scorn coming out this year as well.
I was going to say Scorn. That's
Scathe. Yeah. But I feel if you're going to the full
2024
Mutilator everything, it has to be super serious though as well, just to offset the fact that its name is fucking Mutilator.
Totally. Scorn is if you get scorned, it's like,
oh well.
You'll get over it. You get over that in 5 minutes. You get scathed, you can walk. It's a Band-Aid. A scathe is a Band-Aid offense. Yeah, totally. This is just pathetic.
2024 bullet hell shooter, paper cut. Abrasion. Minor boo-boo.
Carpet burns.
Good. Carpet burns. Well, there's lots of games coming out on the Steam Next Fest demo. Lots of demos coming out on Steam Next Fest this week. So there should be lots of new games heading onto our radars over the next few days. But that is literally all the video game news that happened this week.